HorsePlayerNow.com's Joe Christopher, joined by Kaiten Bradar for another video episode of Horse Racing Night School. Kaiten, on this edition, we're going to talk about visuals, physicality, and equipment. Three very important aspects of horse racing, but also in turn handicapping.
Well, in particular, when you're talking equipment, you're talking about very subtle things that trainers can do and adjust, add or subtract to try to get the very best performance out of a horse. And those clues can help a handicapper decide one way or another whether a horse is going to move forward, whether they're going to stay the same, or whether they're going to regress.
We're going to look at the paddock, we're going to look at the post-parade, we're going to dig a little bit into warm-ups, and we're going to talk all about the equipment that Kaiten just mentioned, piece by piece, to tell you not only what that equipment does, but also how it can potentially improve a racehorse during the course of a race. For Kaiten Bradar, I'm Joe Christopher. Enjoy the video. Here's what to expect from Night School's Physicality long-form video. First off, a general overview of thoroughbred physicality with NYRA's paddock host, Maggie Wolfendale. We'll explore the paddock with Horse Player Now's Kaiten Bradar. We'll dive headfirst into post parades from Keeneland, Remington, and Arlington Million Day with Jeremy Plunk and myself. And finally, switching gears as we get rolling on the harness side with visual tips from Tom Kelly and Dan Perdziak. Let's get into physical. Enjoy the show.
Well, handicapping horses physically is obviously my specialty, and it's the thing that I look for most. It's the most influential thing when looking at races and figuring out which horses fit best. As an overall rule, looking at horses in the paddock, I just look for general well-being. Is their coat nice and shiny? Are they dappled? Furthermore, are they carrying good weight, good muscle weight that is? Do they have good muscle definition throughout their entire conformation? And then two, I look for the specifics regarding the conditions of the race. If it's a sprint race, obviously you're looking for horses that have that more quarter horse body type. They're very broad, they're stocky, built more downhill, their hind end is higher than their shoulder. So that's the things I look for there. As far as horses going longer, they have a longer frame to them, a more aerodynamic, even build to their conformation. Also, first-time turfers. People always love to say, oh, Maggie, that horse has the turf feet on him. Yeah, he does. That means they have those big kind of saucer dinner plate like feet that are able to push off and paddle off the hard turf surface. On the other hand, if you're looking at a sloppy main track, those deer feet, the small tiny feet, also a lighter framed horse, will tend to get over that going a lot better. Another thing to keep in mind is the baby racing. That's my favorite time of year when you have these 2-year-olds making their first starts. You always want to look for, are they behaving? Are they keeping it all together? Because it can be overwhelming for horses that are that young and making their debuts. Also, just an overall fitness level. And two, are they progressive in their physical development? You want to look for horses that look a bit older, a bit mature, even though they're 2-year-olds, as compared to the ones that are kind of lacking that muscle definition. So those are the things I like to look for in the paddock. But as far as going out on the racetrack, some jocks choose to stay with the pony and some choose to go away from it. For instance, Ramon Dominguez is always one that warms his horses up without the pony. You just want to look for horses that are kind of on the bit, have nice carriage to their overall frame. Horses that aren't getting washy on the track, that don't appear nervous. Those are the ones that generally make better efforts when the gates spring open.
Well, Kaiten, the time has come to talk more specifically now about equipment. And let's start with probably the most obvious piece of equipment that people can see, and that's blinkers. First of all, explain what blinkers are and why trainers utilize them on racehorses.
Blinkers are just eyewear, so to speak. Sometimes trainers will use them for a protective measure. Maybe a horse has had an eye injury and they'll put a clear plastic cup, but that's a little different than the real traditional blinkers or cups that are put on horses' eyes in varying sizes to hopefully refocus them, and sometimes put a little bit more speed into a horse, because a horse who's a bit more focused, a bit more keen on what's happening right in front of him might tend to show a little bit more speed, or may tend not to loaf or get lazy through the stretch. Sometimes horses wait for other horses, but if they can't see on either side, they just keep focusing on the finish line.
And there are pieces of equipment, blinkers in particular, called cheaters. Explain what that is.
Little hole cut in the back of the cup of the blinker hood, or the part that goes over the eye, that allows them to see out of the corner of their eye a little bit of that horse coming up beside them. So they don't see the whole horse, but they do see that something is coming. So the cheaters are sometimes used to allow that competition or the competitive edge to kick in through the stretch, but they can also be used for a trainer who really wants to take the blinkers off a horse for some reason, but doesn't want to go to the trouble of going back to the starting gate and getting the blinker change approved. So sometimes you'll see cheaters or even cups that are cut way down so that there's only this much there. They're not really blinkers, they're really not doing anything, but they still satisfy the rule.
Now, every horse potentially is a puzzle for the trainer, trying to figure them out through equipment changes and so on and so forth. But every race is a puzzle for the handicapper. How can we use blinker information to potentially put us on a right horse?
Well, you know, if you're looking at maiden races or first-time starters, horses that are relatively untested, and you see them come out with blinkers, generally you think one of two things. You either think that horse is a bit erratic and needs some blinkers to kind of keep him straight and under control, or you think this is a horse who has really been revved up and geared up and the trainer is really thinking that they could win right off the bat. They have the blinkers on, they mean business. So with first-time starters, sometimes those blinkers mean, and they definitely have worked with the blinkers and shown that they're capable of working well. Generally, a trainer's not going to put blinkers on if he hasn't tried them out in the morning with the horse. Now, for horses who have raced right along, it's almost the opposite that's true. Usually, you'll see horses who've been racing without blinkers adding blinkers because the trainer feels that that horse hasn't quite given enough of what he's capable of doing. So they're looking for a little extra improvement, something to put them over the top. So the equipment change is in search of that little extra.
Now, when I'm handicapping a race and I see a horse that has worn blinkers several times in a row, and then those blinkers come off, what would be the trainer's reasoning behind a move like that?
Again, same thing, but it could be that the horse has been a little bit keener than the trainer would like early in the races and thinks that maybe if you take those blinkers off, the horse will relax and settle a little bit more. It could be a case of a trainer feeling that the horse just isn't running well with the blinkers, and maybe you change the equipment up, you'll change the performance. But in both cases, it always means the same thing, ultimately, which is the trainer hasn't gotten the results they want quite yet, and they think if they change, take the blinkers off or put them on, they're going to get a little bit more.
Now, there are other visual pieces of equipment that we will see as horse players and fans that need to be explained. One of those is a shadow roll. Exactly what is a shadow roll and what is its purpose?
Well, sometimes trainers will put a piece of equipment, it's a leather piece or nylon, across a horse's nose. That's a nose band in general, but if it has a piece of fleece or sheepskin, kind of a fuzzy colored piece over the top of that, that's considered the shadow roll. And generally, trainers will put shadow rolls on horses who tend to carry their head a little bit high, so that hopefully it just gradually lowers the head carriage a little bit. Sometimes the horse has been actually looking at the shadows on the ground or looking at things all around, and that shadow roll literally puts kind of a shelf between the horse and what's right here, gets that horse to stop focusing on what's on the ground and to just look toward the finish line or straight ahead.
Now, bandages are a big thing for handicappers as well. You see the little F notation in the daily racing form of the track program to indicate when a horse has worn front bandages in the past. When you see a horse come into the paddock with front bandages and they've never worn them in a race before, is that a red flag for you? And how do you evaluate bandages in general?
It isn't necessarily a red flag for me, but I really look at the trainer and the pattern. There are some trainers who always put bandages on their horses, particularly on the dirt, because those bandages generally are put on as a protective measure to keep the horse from chafing or actually scraping the bottoms of their heels on the racetrack. They're called rundown bandages. So oftentimes some trainers, when they're racing horses on the dirt, do it as a precautionary measure. It's standard equipment for them. Other trainers always put them on claiming horses because they don't want anybody seeing what the legs look like of that horse, for good or for bad. There's an old, I think, wives' tale that when the bandages come off horses, that means the trainer's really trying, and that maybe the horse hasn't been giving his best effort up till now. You take the bandages off and they just cut loose. I don't buy that anymore. I think more often than not, particularly in claiming races, you see horses with bandages, and I don't really worry about it one way or the other.
Now, when horses come out onto the racetrack, or when you see them in the paddock, oftentimes you see that their tongues are tied down. What would be the purpose for that? What kinds of horses need that action and that equipment from a trainer, and is there any way we can utilize that information to our benefit?
Well, the thing about a tongue tie, which in many cases is considered almost standard piece of equipment, is that it's used to fasten the tongue to the bottom of the mouth so that the bit rests on top of the tongue. Sometimes horses will get a little active with their tongues and they don't know that they like the way the bit feels in their mouth, and they'll actually get their tongue over the bit. And in racing circles, when we say somebody has their tongue over the bit, it means they're all uptight and getting anxious about something. That tongue over the bit, though, is an uncomfortable position. It can block the airway, it can interfere with steering, it can make it difficult to control the horse. So you put the tongue tie on, the bit stays where it's supposed to, the horse is able to breathe more completely, get more air, and is able to be controlled and steered more easily. With a horse, sometimes young horses, they haven't experienced the tongue tie before, and the trainer won't put the tongue tie on early or right away. They don't want to shock them or do something that they've never done before with them. But generally, as the horses race, you'll see the tongue tie added if they haven't won right away or if they haven't, run a certain way. Sometimes it's meant as a corrective measure, but most of the time it's just a standard measure that's taken by a lot of trainers.
Another topic to discuss when it comes to equipment are shoes. Standard shoes, we hear about bar shoes, we hear about mud caulks. How often are shoes changed? How important is the shoeing? Is that information that we should pay attention to? A lot of handicappers don't like playing horses when they hear they're wearing bar shoes. Is that something that deters you?
Well, bar shoes can be a big deterrence to me, and so can aluminum pads. It depends on the surface, but particularly on an off track or a track that's a very hard, fast track, a bar shoe, the horse is just not able to get the same traction that they would with a more conventional shoe. Usually also aluminum pads or bar shoes are used either to protect an old injury or to protect very tender feet. So again, that might give you pause too, but the good news is that at least the foot is protected, so they're not having added concussion, and maybe their feet aren't bothering them as they run. But on the slick going, on sloppy going, I would never play a horse with a bar shoe. I would never play aluminum pads. Generally, you like to see more standard types of shoes. They are reshod about once every month, and sometimes trainers will wait and try to shoe them right around a race so that it's kind of like that new pair of sneakers that you put on your feet. You get brand new shoes right away, you're in good shape. After you've worn those shoes for about 12 hours, your feet might start to feel a little sticky. And so you would either shoe them right before the race and let them spring to life with new shoes, or you shoe them way out from the race so that their feet have time to adjust to the new shoes. But the surface of the hoof is very similar to a fingernail. So people worry about, shortening the hooves or dealing with filing the hooves on a regular basis, but it's very similar to your fingernails, and they do have to be maintained and cared for about once a month.
Now, this might be completely ironic, but I've noticed over the course of time that when a horse has a shoe repair in the paddock before a race, I don't care if that horse is 8-5, 20-1, or 50-1, they almost never run well. Is that ironic, or is there something to that?
No, it's not coincidence. I think there's a couple different factors, but the biggest one of all is that 3 shoes have already been on and 1 is different, and it's a new shoe. And for the horse, that's got to be a little bit offsetting. If it's a minor shoe repair where all they had to do was pound in an extra nail, it might not be so bad, but it's also upsetting to the connections as well as to the horse himself, who's kind of had his pattern or routine broken, and horses are creatures of habit. So I think both the stress of just having to deal with it in the paddock and having a little bit of a delay, and on top of it also having to run with kind of, so to speak, different shoes adds up to getting beat.
One more equipment change that we're going to talk about, and it's the ultimate one. It's when a full male horse becomes a gelding. How can that change a horse's attitude? How can that help them mature? How could that potentially help them become a better racehorse?
Well, first of all, this puts the horse's mind more on racing and other things besides fillies and mares and breeding. So it can refocus a horse's energy, but it can also cause a horse who has maybe had some discomfort involved with being a full stallion, have that discomfort relieved. And that does happen quite a bit for a lot of stallions, where they get uncomfortable in terms of their hindquarters, they have issues, physical issues, and so in many cases the gelding actually helps to resolve those issues. But I do think that first-time gelding is usually a good angle with a horse, especially if a horse is really pretty well bred and really hasn't been performing. It's usually because they have been unruly, they haven't trained the way their connections would want them to, and they haven't been able to focus on the business of running. Kate and Braid are joining you from the walking ring at Gulfstream Park, one of the most important places, in my opinion, to take a look at horses before you actually go up and make a wager. I'm looking to see how horses are generally speaking. Do they appear to be in good health? Are they carrying good flesh? Do they feel good? Do they feel poorly? Just like people, horses have off days, and by looking at them before they actually get on the racetrack, you get an initial impression of which way they're leaning. Past that, you're looking for specific types. In maiden races, you might be looking for general fitness, and you can tell that by looking at their body and whether the muscles are fully developed, whether there's definition. You're also looking to see expression. Are they seemingly scared or startled by things, or are they settled and professional when they walk around the ring? Are they prancing on their toes? A lot of different types, all positive signs, but horses that are acting up, acting anxious, getting nervous, generally speaking, can be a bad sign. In other types of races with more mature horses, you sometimes tend to look for certain types. Sprint races, you may look for a shorter, stockier, more muscular type of horse that indicates a lot of speed. Whereas in turf races or longer distance races, you might be looking for a kind of a lankier, big-bodied type of horse that may take a little longer to get going. Just like people, though, there are exceptions to every rule. So the more you see these horses and become accustomed to the way they look and their habits, the better off you're going to be. As horses enter the walking ring for the third race at Gulfstream, for example, a maiden $50,000 claiming race, every horse in the field has raced at least once, but many are going to be trying the one-turn, 1-mile distance for the first time. You're going to take a look at each horse as they go by and make an initial impression or observation. The one, Double Reserve, very bright-eyed and alert, seems to be tuned into everything going on in the paddock. Horse has some size and looks like the type that might take to a little bit longer distance. The two, really looking nice, has a bit of roundness and looks as if the horse is in good shape. Fitness-wise, there's some definition to the hindquarters, but I particularly like the expression on the two, really kind of bright-eyed, taking everything in, the coat shiny and healthy looking, all positive signs for the two. And overall, the horse strikes me as looking pretty happy to be here. A little bit different look on the three because this filly has blinkers on, and so you don't get a chance to see the horse's eyes, which sometimes can be a little bit harder to gauge how they're reacting to everything. But at the same time, when you look at the three, striding out nicely, walking around, does look as if he's getting a little bit hot. When he swishes his tail, you can see a little bit of lather underneath his tail if you look very closely. If you see a bit of white foam either behind a horse's hind legs or on their neck, usually that's a sign of them reacting either to the heat or to nerves in general. Doesn't always mean that they're going to lose, but more times than not, they're expending some energy before they actually get out on the racetrack. But the three does have a little prance and does look pretty alert and kind of bouncing around, which I think are all positive signs. Also, a little arch in the tail away from the hindquarters indicates health, that they're striding out, that they have no pains or any problems in the hindquarters at all. So you do like to see a little arch of the tail away from the body. That's a positive sign. The four is a real different sort of horse, looks-wise, all the way around. Also has a very good competitive look about him and has 4 bandages. Now, a lot of people think that's a bad sign. I often think trainers will put bandages on a horse if they're running on the dirt for the first time, just as a precautionary measure. And some trainers in claiming races always put bandages on so that no one can see what the legs look like. So I don't necessarily view it as a bad sign, but bandages are something to keep an eye on to see whether they're added or whether they're taken off. The four also kind of just a real swanky way of walking around the paddock, dances a little bit, starts jogging a little bit. I think those are all positives. This horse looks ready to go, in my opinion. It's another one that has a nice arch to his neck, has a nice arch at the tail away from the hindquarters, and just looks sitting on ready, in my opinion. Another one also that has some size and might take to the 1-mile distance. A couple other horses that don't strike me as particularly good or bad, they're just middle of the road. And in my program, I denote them with just a line, meaning nothing special, nothing caught my eye, but that doesn't mean there's anything bad either. The 5. The 5's not really showing a lot of energy, but at the same time, there's nothing that I would say would make me think as a negative or that they're not feeling well, but they're not eye-catching, so this would be a horse that I just give a straight line to or consider maybe, but no strong opinion either way. Also on the 5, the tail's a little bit flat to the hindquarters, a little flatter than I would like. The same is true of the 6. That tail's kind of pasted a little closer to the body. So those 2 horses might have a couple strikes against them in my book just on their physicality alone. 7 horse, nothing good, nothing bad for the most part. Hasn't done anything wrong, but at the same time hasn't done anything that makes you say, wow. And the 8 horse is another one that has a nice roundness to him. He walks fully. He kind of strides out as he's walking around the ring. That would be one I would watch warm up to see if they seem to come to life a little bit, because 8 has been very quiet, not really lifted his head up very much the whole time he's been walking around. So he might be a horse to watch and see if he gets a little brighter as he gets out on the racetrack. But all in all, on looks alone, the 4, Crazy About Me would be the horse that would catch your eye and that you might wager on just based on physicality alone. If you like the past performances, then it's a no-brainer. The 2 is a first-time starter, never raced before, so you're looking for fitness. Has kind of a square shoulder, which to me suggests speed. Very narrow type of rangy sort, but looks fit enough. You do see some muscle definition in the hindquarters. The one thing about the 2, never having been here before, you can tell by looking at her. She's looking at everything. Her head's all over the place, and she wants to be a little bad. She wants to misbehave, but she also just wants to check things out. She's not quite sure. I would write on my program green for this one, meaning inexperienced, not sure what it's all about. If she's doing it in the walking ring, she's probably going to do it on the racetrack. First of all, the 8 has what's called a Sherwin. That's a piece of equipment that goes across its forehead, down its face, and connects to the bit. It's just used to keep the bit in place. It doesn't really help or hurt anything. Also 4 bandages, and the 8 is bouncing all over the place. She's tiptoeing around the paddock, so to speak. I think of that as a very good sign. Her ears are very alert. She's got a curve to her neck. She's got a roundness, generally speaking, but she's not fat. She's, in fact, quite tucked up. If you look from her shoulder back toward her hind flanks, she actually gets narrower, and you do see some muscle definition. She makes a very nice appearance, and she's got the equipment on suggesting that the trainers are ready to go. Starting with, he's got a shadow roll and blinkers in terms of equipment. If you go down to his feet, look at his feet. He's got big, flat, dish-like feet. A lot of people feel that those types of feet are best suited for the grass. So that really looks like a turf foot. Big, flat, wide foot. He actually has a body like a sprinter. He's got a very square shoulder, short neck, short coupled horse with a powerful hindquarters. If you look, the engine's in the back there. Those are the types of horses that are really good sprinting. Seems well suited for both the distance, which is a sprint here, as well as the surface, which is turf. I'll tell you what else as he walks up to you, straight on, you see he's fairly wide through the chest. That's another thing about a sprinter. A lot of times you'll see them very wide through the chest if you look at them head on. The 2's just stomping the ground a little bit. He might be mad about something. He's swishing his tail as well. So sometimes those are signs of just being aggravated. He might have a fly buzzing around. He is also a very powerful looking horse. Very powerful hindquarters, very wide through the chest. He's got hind bandages, which are probably precautionary. You can see a lot of muscle definition. Some people call it almost Tootsie Rolls. If you look, there's real definition in the flank. You can see almost a line of muscle, showing how powerful he is. And that shoulder, again, a big square shoulder, short neck. Continues switching his tail. He probably just wants to get on the racetrack and get on with it. So the 3 has a little bit different body type, but he definitely looks like a turf horse. He's a little bit more narrow, maybe not a sprinter, but at the same time, he kind of has that turf look to him. It's almost a European look, long-bodied, kind of flowing way about him. As we look at horses that are pointing for a turf race, you see the one right off the bat has kind of, again, that European kind of turf look. Long, lanky, free-flowing stride as he walks. Getting a little bit hot. You can see he definitely feels good as he bounces there just a little bit. That's a good sign. That means He feels good, he's excited, he likes what he's doing. Now, if it continued or if he got hotter and hotter or didn't settle in, then I would think of it as a negative, but for right now, he looks great. Yeah, some of them are, when they grind their teeth, some of it's nervousness, some of it's just playing with the bit and trying to get the bit comfortable, but you will hear almost a grinding sound sometimes. It's not something to be alarmed at unless it were combined with some other factors. The 8, you can see he's playing with his tongue a little bit, although he's got a tongue tie. You can see the little bit of white cloth under the chin that indicates the tongue tie. But the 8 is just kind of fidgeting a little bit with his tongue. Otherwise, everything seems good. He's gotten a little bit hot as well. You see just a little bit of lather between his hind legs as he walks. Sometimes bigger horses are going to sweat a little more than some of the smaller horses too, and he is a pretty big, strong-looking type of horse, so that might not be such a bad sign. It's humid in South Florida. Some of them are going to sweat. It's when it becomes profuse that you might get worried about it. The 4, another one, very healthy-looking coat. Dapples on the hindquarters are those little black tortoiseshell spots right at the top of the rump. That's a sign of well-being, and that is a great sign when you see a dappled horse. They're doing well, they're feeling well from the inside out. Also, a really good muscle tone, very alert, high head carriage, but the horse is very poised as he walks. He's a nice-looking horse, the 4. A horse who's been pretty highly regarded, and he does stand taller than most of the other horses. We mentioned the shoulder gives him the impression that he may show a little bit of speed, and he is a strong, muscular type. But again, the body style suggests he can handle a little bit longer distances. Just a really attractive horse to look at. And again, he shows a little life, he dances just a little bit, and then he settles right back down and does exactly what he's told to do. Ears are forward, see the little buck kick? It's just a sign I want to do something else. Let me go do something else. Those are all really positive signs in my book. 6, his head is low, his ears are back. He just doesn't look happy at all. He looks like something's bothering him, or perhaps he doesn't want to be here. His tail is plastered to his hindquarters, and he doesn't seem like he really wants to even walk around the ring. He's not physically in any distress, but you can see he's not striding out. He's kind of resisting his handler, and the handler is kind of having to drag him around a little bit and get him to just keep walking around there. That's the type of horse that I usually kind of draw a line through based on physicality. So a schooler isn't exactly a night schooler, but you'll see a lot of schoolers at the racetrack on a daily basis. It's simply practice for the afternoon's races. When a horse comes to the paddock for the first time in the afternoon, they've never experienced anything quite like what they see on a race day. So a trainer will simulate that experience, both for newcomers and first-time starters, as well as horses who are experienced, to get any nervous energy and any ants out of their pants before they come over for the real thing. Some trainers do it repeatedly. Other trainers always do it as a rule 1 or 2 days out from a race. And some trainers don't school at all once they've seen that their horse behaves fine in the paddock. It's kind of a personal preference. But as the horse walks around, in this case, it's denoted schooler with the apron that the handler or groom is wearing. And the horse is just taking in the sights, seeing everything from a little different perspective than what he or she might have seen in the afternoon. Sometimes you'll see horses get much more nervous or antsy than this one is. This horse strikes me as either very laid back or kind of a pro, because he seems to be taking it all in stride. But if you did see some nerves, if you saw the horse get hot, that wouldn't be a bad thing either. That's actually accomplishing the mission. The trainer's getting all that nervous energy out well before race time. When they come over for race time, they can be calm, cool, and a completely different character than what they showed in the schooling ring. So when a trainer brings a young horse or a first-time starter up to school, they're doing it because they've probably never seen anything like it before. They just want them to get used to the surroundings and not be shocked the first time they come over for the races or the real thing. But older, more experienced horses will come to anticipate a race at hand. So the reason a trainer would often bring them back to school, even if they're good in the paddock, is to make sure that they don't get overly eager on race day. This gets a little bit of the edge off, so to speak, because they after the first time know that when they come up here in the afternoon, they come up here to race. They mean business. Trainer doesn't want them to get overly excited, so they'll bring them back before. Also, if they ship to a new place, a lot of times the trainer will bring them over to school so they can see the crowd, they can see anything unusual or that might be different from their home track. When horses come in for races like the Kentucky Derby, you'll see those trainers school those horses all week long because many of them have never been to Churchill Downs before, they've never seen the paddock before, and even though you can't simulate the 100,000 plus fans that will be crowding around the paddock come race day for the Derby, you can come close with a lot more people than they've probably ever seen before. You want to just take every advantage you can, and one of those advantages or edges is schooling.
The ability to apply horse physicality can be a valuable weapon in wagering. Horse profiling. Did a horse look dull last time and more perked up today? Knowing how a horse profiles out can certainly be an added bonus from start to start. Just remember, even if a horse gets a ribbon in the beauty contest, they still have to be fast enough to compete. Let's take a look at some visual handicapping tips. As mentioned, they can be a weapon, but only in intra-race wagering. You're only looking at post-parades, paddock, and warm-ups one race at a time. Never make a bet until after the post-parade. If you're going to use physicality as a weapon, you need to go all the way. Handicap the race, watch the post-parade, make your final decisions. Don't forget that the post-parade can increase confidence in betting on or against certain horses. It can also help you add a horse to the gimmicks that you haven't seriously considered on paper. Horse physicality can also help you find long shots in races where you have no strong paper opinion. When I watch a post parade, I like to put pluses next to the horses that I think stand out as they walk by. Let's take a look at some of the signs that I'm looking for. First off, controlled enthusiasm, a shiny and dappled coat, defined muscle tone, a fluid gait when they walk, perhaps a slight prance, a neck bow, which is certainly a sign of confidence, alert ears. Front bandages off for the first time, particularly with the older horses. That may mean they're feeling awful good. And when horses warm up away from the pony, it certainly can be a sign of readiness. Now let's take a look at post-parade minuses. You don't want a horse that's too prancy or even rambunctious. An incessant tail swish could mean the horse is angry. Teeth chattering or washed out on a cool day, which means they're sweaty, those are signs of nervousness. You certainly don't want to see a horse that's disinterested, particularly if they're a younger horse. Front bandages on a horse for the first time could be a negative sign, particularly with a trainer that doesn't use front bandages often. And with horses coming back off of a layoff, you don't want to see a horse that's overweight. Other potential positives to look for: blinkers on or off. Equipment changes can spark improvement. And if a horse is a first-time gelding, maybe they'll be a bit more focused. Some negatives to watch out for: shoe repairs in the paddock before the race. For whatever reason, those horses don't seem to run as well as they should. If a horse is dismissed from the post-parade, that means that horse is naturally nervous, probably not good in tight quarters during the running of a race. If a horse doesn't want to load in the starting gate, run to the window and cash your tickets. Those horses seldom win. And if a horse breaks through the starting gate before the start and they still allow that horse to race, you probably don't want to have a bet on that one either. Without further ado, let's take a look at some post parades. On big stakes days, it can often be difficult to separate horses based on their physicality. These horses are talented, they're physical thoroughbred specimens. Most of them are composed, particularly in the races for older horses. But on Arlington Million Day, in the Arlington Million, if you liked Real Solution on paper, your confidence had to increase based on the way he looked in the post-parade. Shiny coat, he is all class, looks like an absolute specimen on the racetrack, and he is the adjudicated winner of the Arlington Million at odds of 8-1. A couple of other horses from Festival Day to take a look at. The Europeans, most of them go into the post parade without a pony. Dandino, the favorite in the St. Ledger, was no exception. He's got a little bit of sweat on his neck, but it was a warm day, so we're going to give him the benefit of the doubt. He's built to run all day, running in a mile and 11/16 race. He's a specialist at this distance. He looks the part on the racetrack, and he comes through with the victory at odds of 4-5. Another horse that looked good in the St. Ledger Post Parade was Najar. He is the picture-perfect specimen as far as what a thoroughbred should look like. Calm, composed, shiny coat, little bit of controlled energy. He winds up running third at odds of 5-1. In the Beverly D, to me, two horses stood out. They're both Europeans and they run 1-2. Dank, an absolute picture perfect specimen of class on the racetrack. She looks fantastic. She looks very composed, away from the pony. She looks like a sure pro in this race, and she runs to those looks, winning the Beverly D at odds of 3-1. And Gifted Girl, a horse who wasn't nearly as accomplished as Dank going into the Beverly D, certainly makes a nice appearance in the post parade. If you liked her chances to improve in the Beverly D and run well at a price, you were rewarded a second place finish at odds of 11-1. Let's take a look at the first race from October 21st at Keeneland. These are 2-year-old races that we're going to see from Lexington, and this one is a 6-furlong sprint for $50,000 maiden claimer. So we want to see horses, obviously, that have a little bit of energy, but also appear to be calm and composed. And the first horse we're going to take a look at in this post parade from Keeneland on October 21st is the number 7. The number 7 here is Mandate's Beauty. And to me, this horse looks just a little bit too prancy for her own good. She looks a little nervous. As you can see at this point, she's 9-2 in the wagering. A little bit too prancy, so I give her a negative. Now, the number 8, Orland Flash, is a big long shot at 24-1. She looks like a sprinter in build. She has a little bit of prance to her. She looks alert, maybe worth considering in your gimmicks. Now, the number 10, Going Gaga, aptly named here. She's nervous. She's hyped. She definitely looks like she would rather be somewhere else as she's trying to figure things out. This is a horse I would definitely give a negative to. Now let's take a look at the results from the first race at Keeneland on October 21st, and we'll see where the number 8, Orland Flash, that was a long shot that we liked a little bit. She went off at odds of 29-1. She wound up finishing 4th. Definitely worth using in your superfecta. May have helped you cash a nice ticket. Number 7, Mandate's Beauty. We thought she was a little bit too prancy. She winds up finishing a tired 5th at odds of 5-1. And Going Gaga, the 10 horse. She was nervous, overhyped. She had her tail swishing. She winds up finishing 9th after showing brief speed at odds of 16-1. Next up, the fourth race from October the 19th, this race for 2-year-old turfers going a route of ground. And we're looking for horses with athletic builds in here, horses obviously that are composed, 2-turn racing, much different than a sprint. For the babies, you see the number 4, Son of a Samurai, is the favorite at this point, looking pretty good in the post parade. But we see number 5, this is Jack and John, and this horse is way too prancy, very nervous, giving the jockey a total workout before the race. Definitely a toss for me at odds of 9-2. But following up with Bambazanki, who is an absolute standout in the post parade, controlled enthusiasm, ears alert, slight prance. Bambazanki, an absolute double plus standout in the post parade for me for the fourth race at Keeneland on October the 19th. And let's take a look at those results. We'll see where Bambazanki gets the job done here. He wins this race by a neck as the 9-5 second choice over the favorite number 4, Son of Samurai, who also looked pretty good in the post parade. And look where Jack and John finishes. He finishes 4th at odds of 6-1. This is a horse that is getting some play that, based on the looks in the post parade, was a total toss out for me. Next up, a 7-furlong polytrack dash for 2-year-old maiden special weight males, and we'll see where number 2 has been excused from the post parade. That is Senioritis, and that's an automatic toss for me, an overwhelming negative with the 2. As we continue on with this post parade, we're going to see number 4, and that is Winning Cause, a horse that we have become pretty familiar with, and he looks like an early developer. Sprinter's build, he's built like a tank, in fact, and he has a slight prance to his step. Look what we have here, number 5, Oxbow, the eventual winner of the Preakness, already showing signs of class. His neck is bowed, but he has a router's build. This is a sprint on polytrack. We all know now that he's better off 2 turns on dirt, but Oxbow already showing in his post-parade presence that he could potentially be a classy individual. The number 6, also with a sprinter's build, that is Marchman. Good appearance in the post-parade. Looks like he'll run a big race on this particular day. Let's take a look at the results, and we see where the 2 horses that we zeroed in on as potential sprinters run 1-2, number 4 Winning Cause and number 6 Marchman at odds of 3-1 and 8-1 respectively. Oxbow finishes 4th on this day at odds of 11-1, but we know there are bigger and better things to come for him down the road. Router's build, probably better off once he tries a distance that suits him better. And then we look at Senioritis, the horse that was warmed up away from the post parade, absolutely no factor in finishing 8th. 2-year-old maiden special weight polytrack sprinters in this particular event. And I know you all want to know how to pick a long shot out of the post parade. Well, here is a perfect example. Let's take a look at number 4, Strong Response. Sprinters build, slight prance in the step, popping in the post parade, an under the radar barn, and thus a long shot at odds of 15-1. Strong Response gets a big plus on my program. On the flip side, let's take a look at the favorite, Kamchatka. The number 10 looks dull, looks disinterested. I don't care what the form looks like, this horse gets a negative for me in the post parade. And as we take a look at the chart, not only does Strong Response win, but he wins going away at odds of 15-1 by 5 lengths. Kamchatka, as the 2-1 lukewarm favorite, finishes a disappointing 4th. Here's a perfect example of for or against when we compare odds to post-parade looks. This is a race for 2-year-old filly sprinters on polytrack. And let's take a look first at the 2-1 favorite, Beautiful Miss. Now, to me, she's a little too prancy. Lots of wasted energy. I'm going to give her a negative in this particular post-parade as the favorite. We're looking to play against her in this particular spot, not based on past performances, but based on looks. On the flip side, number 9, Pretty Hot Princess. She's overlooked at 30-1. Alert ears, slight prance in her step, more controlled enthusiasm. Taking a look at the chart, the number 5, Beautiful Miss, closes belatedly to be 6th as the 2-1 favorite, where the number 9, Pretty Hot Princess, at odds of 30-1 finishes 3rd. Pretty good horse to have in your gimmicks. Race 7 on October the 18th at Keeneland, a wonderful race to look at the post parade, very productive. I gave plus marks to 4 horses in this race and a big negative to 1. Number 2 looks very good on the track. That is our double play, as does the 4, Deadly Truth. This horse at odds of over 30-1 from under the radar connections, definitely on my radar. The horse I absolutely hate in the post parade happens to be the prohibitive favorite from the barn of Todd Pletcher, number 5, Nevada. Too prancy, wasted energy. It's wonderful when you see a horse like this in the post parade at very low odds that you think, based on the looks, you can take a stand against. Number 8, Pegasus Star. Neck is bowed. This horse exuding confidence. We know he's a good 3-year-old, and he looked pretty darn good as a 2-year-old in this fall post parade. And then we've got number 9. We know he's a star now. Will Take Charge in his maiden breaker, as it turns out. He just has a classy walk about him. It's really hard to explain unless you see it, and you're seeing it now. Classy walk for the number 9, Will Take Charge. And as we take a look at the results of this race, I mentioned this is Will Take Charge's maiden breaker, goes on to win the Travers as a 3-year-old. The other horses we liked in the post parade, numbers 4, 8, and 2, they finished 3rd, 4th, and 5th respectively, with the longest price, Deadly Truth, at odds of 37-1, rounding out the trifecta. Certainly a nice horse to have in the gimmicks. And the prohibitive favorite, Nevada, finishes a dull 7th here at odds of 3-5. We were against him in the post parade. The result played out well. This is the way you can drop a bomb and hit a home run at the races. That's a look at some 2-year-old post parades from Keeneland. Now let's turn the mic over to Jeremy Plunk as he takes a look at some horses in the flesh at Remington.
Post-parade analysis gives you an instant chance to make an impression. Uncle Gardner wears the red band across his nose. That's a shadow roll in night racing at Remington Park. That's a common piece of equipment. You'll see the shadows coming right up from the track there. The 2 is Sitting High, and Sitting High wears blinkers. What you want to do when you see a horse wearing blinkers, check the program instantly. Do they normally wear blinkers? Did you miss a change? No, he normally does. The 3, Handsome Yansome, looks good on the racetrack. Good muscle tone in the front, good hindquarters to him. This is a horse who looks good at 3-1. Number 4, Ricky Tikki Tavi, long body to this one. It's going to take a horse like this a long time to unwind. He doesn't have that kind of explosive body. That's why he's a come from behind her when you look at his past performances. The 5, Dr. Peter, looks good on the racetrack. I'd like to see his head up a little higher, but his body looks good. The head is up high on the 6, but notice the belly here. It goes almost flat, straight from front to back. It doesn't tuck up near the hindquarters. This horse has been off since the spring, and it shows. He doesn't look as fit as his stablemate for Steve Asmussen, the 7. Smoky Deputy, look how that belly is tucked up near the hindquarters back there. 7 looks better than the 6. The 8, Tonkawa, is another horse with one of those long backs to him. This is kind of a scopy horse who's going to do better in routes than his usual sprints that he's been running. The 9, Perfect to Please, this horse is built like a sprinter. The Damsire's Forest Wildcat, and it shows here. Will he route? We'll find out. And the 10 looks best of all on the racetrack. Brian G. Head up, muscle tone looks good. Now let's look at some lower end claimers. We're not looking for Mr. Right. We're looking for Mr. Right now at this class level. Red Rally, the one wears front wraps. It's typical for this horse and typical of the class level. Nothing really bad to report here. And really, it's a horse at 19-1 who will probably run to his past performances. The 3 Wilby's Ray is a very compact dasher. You see this horse built almost like a quarter horse. You can tell why he's a 4 and 5 furlong sprint type. Lumpy's Ace is niggling on the lead pony. That means that the horse has his attention on the other one, maybe not his head in the game tonight. The 5 Mayday Man looks like a vulnerable favorite. Look at this choppy stride. He's not replacing his footprints with his back legs, and he looks hot on the track. The 6 80 Million, this is a sway back, a horse who's got a big U shape in his back. The jockey sitting in the bucket, as they say. This horse will be hard to keep sound over the long haul. The 7 is a horse who does not look good tonight. The jockey petting him on the neck, one of my worst signs. When you're trying to relax the horse, the tail is swishing. Not a good sign for the 7. The 8 Statehood, this horse is not sweating on a warm night. Looks very good, and the back feet are replacing the front feet in the stride. Good looker there. Midland Man, this is a short stepper who's kind of hot on the racetrack. Another one of the favorites that I don't really like. His back feet are not replacing those front feet in his stride. The 11 Bids Reward, this horse has got a little bit better stride. I just wish he was alert and had the head up a bit more. The 12 looks good, but this is the long-legged horse who may be a little bit better in routes than sprints. We'll see if he can turn back. The 13 Mandate Maker is a compact horse, but again, another short strider. The back feet are not replacing the footprints of those front feet in the stride. Now, this is what you want to see. Look at the beautiful gait and stride on this horse. Jetabilly Prospect, head up, ears up. This horse looks great on the racetrack, and he ends up being the race winner.
Tom and Dan here talking about what we look for when horses come onto the track, standard bred racing. We're here at the Meadowlands on Hambletonian Day. And Dan, what do you take a look at and what perks your ears up, so to say, when horses hit the track?
You know, Tom, what I'm looking for is a horse on its toes who's not paying attention to the crowd, looking forward. And again, you have to be cool, calm, and collective. So you'll see horses sweat. That's certainly something that I'll keep in mind as I go to the window.
Most definitely. I agree with you there, especially with young horses who are not quite as experienced in these post parades or just in races in general. You don't want to see a horse that's very anxious out there, sweating, especially on hot days. That can take a lot out. Take a look, see if you see any white on the horse's underside or flanks. That'll give you a pretty good indication of whether that horse is relaxed or whether he's worked himself up already. Taking a look when horses are on the track, is there something you like to see from a horse that's going to get you to go to a window on a horse?
Absolutely. You know, again, I can't stress it enough. When the horse is on its toes, you know, and focused, it plays a big role in what I'm looking at for a horse. On a day like today, Hambletonian Day, a lot of these horses aren't used to the bigger crowds. They're not used to the daylight and the heat, so it takes some adjustment for them to react to the atmosphere they're in. So watching them in the post parade, that's a key indicator of what's going to happen come post time.
Another thing I like to see as well is a horse that's scoring down at a fairly brisk pace. That tells me that driver is probably going to be aggressive with the horse, leaving out of there. And that's something when you're handicapping the race and trying to see how you think a race is going to shake out. If you are taking a horse that you think needs to be on the front end, watch and see how he's warming up. I'd like to see a driver be aggressive with him as they're scoring down.
So, Tom, I have a question for you. Why is it when the horses are coming out the post parade and scoring down, why are they going the opposite way of the track?
Well, most post parades do come the opposite way of the track, depending on what paddocks they come out of. So that's strictly a question that's answered by knowing where your paddock is.
Hey, Tom, I was watching earlier, and between races, there were horses out there that all had the same color saddlecloth. What is that, and what does that mean? How do you determine what horse that is?
Well, with standard breds, you usually go 2 warm-up miles before, at least a mile beforehand. Usually one jogging at a fairly slow pace. You'll see them out there with a longer, heavier jog cart on. You can tell what horse it is by checking out the saddle pad. The correct number of the horse will correspond to the race that he's in. So take a look at the color of the pad. Take a look at your program pages. If it's light blue, it'll show you that light blue may be race number 8, maybe race number 11. They correspond with the post positions, correspond with the race numbers.
Looking for a fun and easy way to learn more about horse racing? Night School, Tuesday nights. Enjoy access to top racing insiders via chat, video, and radio. Night School caters to fans at all levels. Miss a class? Read the archive. Night School, Tuesday nights. See you then.